Welcome to Light Over Heat with Professor David Yamani. This week I have the first of a two-part series of conversations I had with Ross Eliot. And if you don't know Ross Eliot, you're really missing out. He's one of, I wouldn't necessarily say the best known, but he's certainly one of the most influential, self-identified leftist gun owners in the United States. He was from 2006 till 2011 the publisher of the American Gun Culture Report. Perhaps you've seen it. If not, since then, he's been blogging at Occupy the Second Amendment. So in this first of two conversations, I'll get to know him, his background with firearms, and also talk to him a lot about the American Gun Culture Report and what it was all about. And then in the second conversation, we'll take up some additional issues. I think let me just start by saying, we've I guess been sort of orbiting around each other for a long time. I mean, you've been at this longer than I have, but I picked up on you, fairly soon after I got into the gun culture business, and I think you sort of saw me at some point after that. But tell me about your background. Growing up. Did you grow up with guns, or did you come to guns later? What's your deal with that?
Yeah, well, and this is one of the many similarities that we both have, is that I came from a background that was very far removed from hunting, or for a lot of the pretty typical American exposure to firearms that a lot of people will encounter. So yeah, for me, I grew up in Seattle in the 80s, and I was really lucky that we actually had a house that was kind of on the edge of this gully. And it was a space that was too steep to develop. So you kind of ended up in this urban environment, but also behind the house there was just tons of wild area where kids could romp around and build tree houses and shoot bows and arrows and do a lot of these kind of a lot of times very martial activities that most urban kids couldn't have really gotten away with there. So I really lucked out on that front. But while I was pretty much given free rein to do a lot of things like running around with machetes and throwing hatchets and shooting arrows and stuff like that, my mom particularly was very anti-gun in such a way that even things like squirt guns were originally forbidden, and there was a lot of arguments at every moment of well, okay, I finally got her to say yes to a squirt gun because it seems kind of sad for one child to be the only one not running around on those hot summer days squirting the neighbor kids with everybody else, and so she relented on that front, and then of course after that I wanted a cap gun, and that was a real battle, but she eventually succumbed, and then I was able to have a cap gun, and it finally went all the way to when I think I was 11 or 12, and I of course wanted an air rifle. And that was absolutely the last straw. My mom finally just absolutely dug in her heels. That was not going to happen. And my father saw an opportunity at that point, because at that age I was already quite the budding atheist, and they had picked up on that, and so they decided this was their opportunity. So my dad said, "How about this?" He said, "If I would agree to spend the summer doing a very long form focus on the family, adolescence and your changing body seminar,
Oh, wow.
with all these audio tapes. Oh yeah, audio tapes by Dr. Dobson, the whole thing. Yeah, pretty classic Christian education stuff there. And he said, if you go through the whole summer of doing this with me every day, sitting down and listening to the tapes and filling out the workbook, at the end of that, I will talk your mom into letting you have an air rifle." And I couldn't say yes fast enough, and we did. At the end of the summer, I got my little Daisy BB gun, and that was actually the end for a very long time. I had a good few fun years of getting to shoot my rifle in the backyard. but I kind of lost interest after that. I got really into a lot of other things, and so many of those sort of things just became in my mind little kid activities that I'd been into, and
Hmm.
I wasn't really interested beyond that. I didn't run out and get a gun as soon as I turned 18 or something like that. That was something that I that I got more interested in as my political development took place.
Grounds. But so then,
Oh yeah.
you
Hmm.
saw, guns, you had your good times as a kid with your BB gun, but then you moved on,
Yeah.
and then you were saying you came back to it in the 1990s.
Yeah, because that was around the time that I got very much politically radicalized, and that was something that happened to me in the workplace very much. I was really fortunate that one of my first jobs driving a forklift was at a warehouse where my boss was this old like 80s political punk kid, and he was super radical politically, was a socialist, and he really gave me this working class education on the job because I was a kid who was really interested in history and very fascinated by politics, but it was all, I mean, it was very surface level in a lot of ways. I didn't know much in depth about, say, like the history of labor and working class issues and these kind of things. And so for the first time, this is probably when I'm like 18 or 19 years old. I'm in this warehouse working alongside this person that who's my boss, so I just really respect, but just has all this knowledge about. I'm learning about the Ludlow massacres and like all these early 20th century working class movements and struggles that I had no idea about, and that was so fascinating to me. And yeah, I came out of that experience very much a different person, and set quite on the political road that I've followed to this day.
Hmm.
But that same boss of mine was also a gun owner, and very much as I'm learning all about this, was getting across the idea that if you're someone who cares about working class politics and making your community better, you got to have knowledge. You got to know how to organize in your community. And a part of that is knowing how to use a rifle. And so he was the first person that, well, actually, he wasn't the first person that took me out shooting. But he was the first person as an adult that took me out shooting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and it, yeah, and I really took a lot of that to heart. But still, it wasn't the kind of thing that really made me feel like I should actually have my own firearm ever. It was something that I sort of took on intellectually, but I didn't run out and buy a gun even at that point. And it wasn't until 2004 that I actually bought my first gun. So yeah, probably about, I guess 10 years later after that about. Yeah.
And so what was the turning point as you'd been introduced to firearms earlier? You kind of got some, kind of ideological explanation for their utility. What uh,
Yeah.
what became the turning point for you?
It was reading a bunch of books about Rwanda actually that kind of pushed me over the edge there. And I think I'd been ready to take that next step for probably quite a while, but just nothing had really happened to get me into the space where I felt like, yeah, I probably should also have a gun. And I read some. I think I was reading some articles and some books. When I get interested in a particular topic, I'll frequently just find a whole bunch of sources. And so I think I'd actually read a bunch of different things about Rwanda, and I was struck by the number of times where I would encounter points where a person with a firearm was able to do a lot of good in ways where maybe there was a whole lot of people that were about to get massacred by people with machetes, and then someone with a rifle shows up and that's all it took. The people that were about to get massacred were saved, and it was just very much counter so much of the messaging that you'd get in a lot of the leftist material that I was reading. So I was really struck by that, and then also sort of looking at the larger picture of Rwanda. I was really taken by, and I think this is still considered accurate, that the Rwandan genocide was as as determined by the most number of people in a certain amount of time, the most efficient genocide that we know about in human history. There's certainly many genocides that had a larger body count, but those tended to take place over multiple years, and this was something that happened in a few months and took place using essentially little above Stone Age technology. And it
Hmm.
really started making me rephrase in my head ways I thought about social violence, because I think even then, if you had said, oh well, of course, the more well armed a society is, the more people are in danger, and sort of on a scale of how deadly the weaponry available is in any particular context, the more society is in danger. I think I would have probably have agreed with that kind of statement, and it really made me rethink that, because here you had a situation where people were slaughtering their neighbors, mostly with edged weapons, and on just such a scale that it really superseded the kind of death tolls that you saw in many ways that took place using guns, poison gas, all of these horrible inventions of the modern age, but that actually it seems like we're not significantly required to actually produce such an awful catastrophe. So it really changed the way I viewed social violence, and made me feel like much more than just what I in my head had taken on at that point, which was seeing that this is something that theoretically could make me a more valuable member of my community, to taking the action that if I don't become a responsible gun owner, well, then I'm actually doing a disservice to my community.
Hmm.
So it was shortly after that. Oh, cute cat alert.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was shortly after that reading that I went out and I bought my first firearm, which was a Mossberg 590 shotgun,
Okay.
which I still have.
Classic.
Hmm.
So when you were thinking about sort of um, being an asset to your community, how were you defining your community at that time? What was the most relevant
Hmm.
community to you that you were thinking of?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, that was my friends and my family and the folks that I was active with politically. Which at that point in yeah, if we're looking at 2004, that was, yeah, certainly a lot of the anti-war organizing that I was taking part in at that point. People definitely felt under threat, and looking back now, it almost seems how how naive we were to how compared to how bad things were going to get. But we certainly felt like our communities were in danger, but compared to how bad things got, we had no idea
Hmm.
what it was going to be like. And it was the kind of thing where people would say, "Well, I don't understand why you have a rifle. It's not like there's Nazis marching in the streets. It's not like we're in the bad old days. It's not like the Jim Crow era." And of course, now so many of those things are coming back full throttle. So,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, uh, there have been there have been a few kind of moderately satisfying moments where people who actually kind of gave me shit back in those days have gotten in touch with me and said, sorry, would you actually take me out shooting? Because those things that we used to sort of think were fanciful, they're now happening, and the absence of them back then is kind of why we gave you a hard time back then. But now, actually, yes, it does seem like we are in danger in our communities in those kind of ways that we thought wouldn't might never happen again.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know whether you're the kind of person who doesn't can't really do anything halfway. Uh,
Mm.
but I note that I have, thank you for sending me some
Oh
of
yeah.
these early copies of the American Gun Culture Report, which was, again, how I first came
Mhm.
across you. I think by the time I finally got into guns, you were on the website. I think you had ceased
Mhm.
print publication, but already by this, I'm guessing, I'm looking at this as issue 1.2, so I'm guessing issue 1.1 came out
Mhm.
sometime in 2006. So from 2004 getting a gun to 2006 deciding that you were going to publish
Mhm.
a journal on, or a magazine on gun culture,
Mhm.
that's fairly rapid, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah, and that happened because, yeah, as you were saying, yeah, half measures weren't cutting it, and so as I was developing more of an interest in firearms, I wanted to read everything I could. I just wanted to devour every piece of media I could find, and there was a lot available that was technically worthwhile, but I just couldn't get over the overpowering regressive political angle that you were going to find in just absolutely every publication. Some were worse than others, but yeah, I mean, I was running up against people like Jeff Cooper. If you yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with him. I
Mm-hmm.
actually corresponded with him at one point before his
Really?
death.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I can't remember if I reprinted the letter in any of those issues, but yeah, as in at some point during the first couple of issues I was putting out, I thought to write him a note, um, and just kind of explain what I was doing. And he wrote me back, and he said something to the effect of, "Well, that's a sounds like a very fascinating project. Uh, I don't think you will have any success because, of course, as everybody knows, uh, personal defense and guns are a very masculine right-wing thing that we totally own. So you're probably not going to encounter anybody but yourself that is interested in these kind of things. But I wish you well." So that was pretty much the extent of it. But yeah, he did take the time to write me back,
Wow. Well,
which was
that, I
nice.
mean, that if that letter hasn't been published, it definitely should be
Mhm.
published somewhere, if only online. That's an awesome piece of correspondence. But I did note that in this particular issue that you noted Cooper's passing, and just to give
Ah,
people who
okay.
haven't seen this, the report, a flavor of the kind of angle you're taking, I'll just read the concluding
Mhm.
paragraph where you say, at his departure, it is time to set a new tone, one that must vigorously compete with the old if proponents for American gun rights are to escape being easily dismissed as aging xenophobic troglodytes with itchy trigger fingers and selective memories. We can still honor many worthwhile
Uh,
achievements of Jeff Cooper's lifetime and then solemnly step away from the rest, which I think is, a fairly, it's critical, but maybe fair in the sense of, saying, you don't want to say that everything he did was terrible, but it
Yeah.
did come with a lot of extra things, and I had to kind of acknowledge that as well when I talked about Cooper in my own book, noting that there were
Mhm.
some things that he, said or wrote that were,
Mhm.
very, vile things. So
Yeah,
anyway,
absolutely. Oh
I think
yeah. I mean, he
that
was
gives
pure.
a good flavor of it.
Hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, he certainly needs to be one of the people that is credited with taking practical shooting from a place where, I mean, if you were to look at a lot of the pictures of people shooting handguns back in the early 20th century, you would very commonly see people just doing a lot of this one-handed shooting. And after Cooper, and I think he's probably given a little more credit than he deserves, but he was certainly one of the people that was taking the idea that if you actually need to develop accuracy with a handgun, well, you need to be using two hands here, and a lot of the kind of more scientific work in developing practical shooting. He certainly deserves a lot of credit for that. But yeah, I mean, I in my letter to him, I confronted him with some of the more awful racist things he had published. I think I picked there were a lot. I think I picked like three of the most awful racist things that he had said, and he did not offer any kind of retraction or apology. So yeah, he was definitely that guy.
Yeah.
Even up until the end, had yeah, no interest in walking back even the most awful things that he'd said.
Yeah, but it still took time to write back to you, which I think that's
Yeah.
interesting in
Hmm.
itself. He didn't just say, who's this asshole telling
Yeah.
me, what I should think.
Yeah.
Well, I have
Yeah.
to say that I don't know that there is anything that did as many different things as the American Gun Culture Report did, because just again, looking at this issue, you're looking at gun literature, you're talking about the Bill of Rights, you're talking about what is interesting in the gun press, talking about Eleanor Roosevelt as unexpected gun owner, show offs in gun safety. You have a poetry review, which I'm fairly certain no other gun
Hmm.
magazines have done. A pretty funny kind of Ask Samuel Colt uh,
Oh yeah.
column. So you get a little bit of humor and some book reviews, Hollywood,
Hmm.
and so it's remarkable in the, I think, sort of the breadth of different
Hmm.
ways that you engage the issue of guns, because I think sometimes, despite the proliferation now of different social media, we don't necessarily see a diversity of different ways of
Hmm.
engaging. So I was impressed by that aspect of it, and I assume that most of
Hmm.
these early issues were that was just you were the author, editor, and publisher of the whole thing.
Oh yeah. If there are any unsigned editorials, that was probably just me, I would say. Um, yeah, and yeah, hearing you describe all that, it reminds me how fun that project was. Because the whole idea is in as much as people generally talk about it now as, oh yeah, that leftist gun magazine that used to exist, um, it's certainly not accurate because I I decided that I wanted to publish pretty much anything that was related to firearms and self-defense, et cetera, that wouldn't appear in the mainstream gun media. And that certainly included some libertarians. I mean, I certainly was approached by people who described themselves that way. And if they came up with an article idea that I thought was interesting and and probably wouldn't be the kind of thing that the regular media would be putting out, even if I disagreed with it. And there's certainly articles in there that I published that I didn't particularly agree with the standpoint of the author, but I wanted to keep it interesting. I wanted to put stuff out there from a variety of perspectives, and and that's really what made it fun. I didn't want it to just be Ross Eliot's Socialist Gun Review or something like that. And I mean, that's essentially what I write. I do now with Occupy Second Amendment. That is just kind of Ross Eliot's Socialist Gun Review, and it's rewarding, but not fun in the same kind of way that AGCR was, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
shame.
Yeah.
But in all reality, it was just too much work to keep going. It was a lot.
Yeah. I want to get there, but here's another. This is the I don't even know what this part is about, but it's sort of a conclusion, and this is typical political stance in contemporary American gun literature. Fairly long piece, but in the conclusion, you write, to summarize, it is in these major areas and more that AGCR intends to serve as an alternate voice from the national gun culture. America is far too large and diverse a country for the uniformity and mediocrity of opinion that is currently exhibited by the gun media on such important topics. AGCR does not claim to hold the only correct view on every issue, but that scarcely any others are currently exhibited. Right. So, I think that's
Mhm.
interesting sort of positioning to say,
Oh yeah.
there's a lot more out there that isn't being covered. And on the other hand, we may not
Hmm.
get everything right, but at least we're trying to open up to some of that diversity,
Hmm.
which I think, this is 20, so almost 20 years ago now.
Hmm.
This, I think, idea of gun culture, embracing the diversity of gun owners is still an ongoing conversation. So that's why I feel
Hmm.
like this is really very pioneering work.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just God, just the tediousness of only hearing that one perspective in the the regular gun press. It was and still is just so unbearable.
Yeah. And another one I'm just, again, I was just thumbing through these to get a feel for everything they have. And this is issue 3 from summer of 2008. And I thought it was
Mm.
amazing. You have this "Why do you own a gun" section. You did a sort of competition for people to write in, and you chose
Oh
two
yeah.
winners, grand prize winners, who got copies of that book, "Armed America," the photo book, which I have.
Oh yeah.
And you
Yeah.
you had reviewed that, and one of the two people that you chose was Urian Smees from Lacey,
Mhm.
Washington, who is
Yeah.
actually someone I consider a friend now,
Nice.
who
Okay.
I know through liberal gun owning circles.
Yeah, yeah.
I've met him a couple of times in person. He's
Oh, okay.
so it was just so what like I was like, what a small
Huh.
world. Like this is the cover of that particular issue, but I thought of
Yeah.
what of all the people that wrote in at that time. It shows how
Mhm.
long he's been involved in guns and gun culture, because he's still very active, in promoting
Mhm.
gun ownership from a liberal perspective.
Wow,
Uh,
that is so cool to hear.
so the other thing is, like, and this may be a little esoteric for my average people who check out our channels, but uh, this seems to be, and this was not a part of a culture I was in, but this seems to be part of like the zine culture, right? Where people
Mm.
independently publish magazines and sell them through sort of bookstores and other
Mhm.
channels like that. Whereas is that part of what's happening here?
Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah. I was carried by God. Um, it's so long ago. I don't 100% remember, but yeah, most of the independent bookstores in Portland carried it. A lot of other ones in the Pacific Northwest. Oh, okay. I guess I had a list at one point. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There was at one point I believe there was a couple places in Canada. And then I think actually at one point I got contacted by like some anarchist bookstore in Sweden that wanted copies too. So yeah, I was happy to at least briefly consider it an international publication there. So yeah,
Yeah.
that was pretty fun. Yeah, I had a bunch of different distros that also carried it outside of actual brick and mortar stores. Yeah, that was a lot of fun, but that was also part of the headache too, was trying to keep track of who actually needed more copies and then getting them to that location and so on. Yeah, that was, I mean, compared to just typing something out and then just publishing it, and then the next day looking at my statistics to see if anybody actually read it. It's yeah, just incomparable experiences.
Yeah. No, I mean, City Lights Bookstore, legendary bookstore in San
Mhm.
Francisco, Powell's Books in Portland, and
Yeah.
again, another legendary bookstore,
Yeah.
Left Bank Books in Seattle,
Mhm.
still exists there down
Mhm.
in the
Yeah, yeah.
by the
Mhm.
market. So I was
Yeah,
impressed, because all the other thing is,
yeah.
and again, I wouldn't think City Lights would necessarily be, or Powell's even would necessarily be sympathetic to a publication about
Mhm.
guns. So, was there?
Mhm.
How did you
Right.
get in there for those kinds of places?
Oh, well, places like Powell's. I mean, I used to have like 10 friends that worked at Powell's, so that actually wasn't too hard. I don't have any friends that work there now, but there was a point in my life when I knew a significant number of the staff. So yeah, that wasn't hard. I'm trying to remember if City Lights was a personal connection where I just walked in and talked to their um whoever it's the buyers or the people who yeah, decide what goes in the sections. Actually, yeah, I don't remember it was that I just walked in the door and talked to somebody during one of my visits down there, or it might have been I just made a phone call and talked to someone. But yeah, a lot of the times, especially the more far-flung ones, I would just give people a phone call and see if they were interested, and if they were, then I'd mail them a bunch of copies. Or some of, I mean, I believe it was the place in Sweden. They heard about me and contacted me to see if I'd be interested in getting them some copies, because I wasn't so ambitious that I was going to be going that far afield. But yeah,
Right.
it was yeah, it was so much fun.
And this I'll wrap this section up, but this is so interesting to me. So,
Mhm.
um, the the was this? I'll ask a couple. It's a
Mhm.
two-pronged question. Was this uh, your main occupation, or was it a hobby? And then was it a money maker, a money loser, or a break-even proposition?
Oh, absolutely a money loser.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. There's no way I ever made back what I did in a particular print run. I am pretty sure. Uh, and as far as occupation in those days, that's actually part of what made it so difficult to do, is that was back in my commercial fishing days. So
Mm.
I was actually out on a boat like 5 months out of the year. So I would get back into town, and I mean, and that was what funded it more than anything else. Is typically I'd get off the boat in like late September, and I'd have a bunch of money that then I maybe I could afford to buy one gun for myself and then spend the rest on a print run.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was I would have to have friends monitor my PO box. I'd have to have somebody monitoring my email address so that I could actually, yeah, keep up on people that were writing articles for me. Yeah, I mean, this is also, I mean, right now it's very different with technology. Right now, if you're on a fishing boat out in the middle of the Pacific, odds are very good your captain probably has a sat phone. There may be some kind of a hotspot that you can even get texts out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
But back then, you were lucky if you were on a boat with satellite radio. Like I used to tell people that if I'm out on the water and you want to get me a message, then you're going to have to carry out a high profile assassination and write a manifesto. And in your manifesto, like say, like that's the only way I'm going to hear about it. Like is if you do something that gets on the BBC. Like otherwise, I'm not going to know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this again, this particular where's my oh yeah, this particular issue
Mhm.
had this interesting. It's got some photos of you on fishing vessel
Mhm. Oh
charity
yeah,
in
yeah.
Sitka, apparently corresponding with the editor of American Handgunner from
Oh yeah.
your from Alaska, and then also this issue, which I take was maybe one of the later issues, also.
Oh yeah.
Some
I think that's the last one. Yeah.
this okay. I was wondering if this was the last
Mm-hmm.
issue, but
Yep.
again, some
Yeah.
pictures there. So this was, you think this was the last issue here
That's the very
too?
last one. Yeah.
So it's interesting. You're wrapping that up. I shot a gun for the first time in 2011, and this is from winter spring 2010. So the wind down and my
Yeah.
spinning up didn't quite overlap. But
Mhm.
tell me about winding that down, and then let's press forward into the contemporary era.
Oh, uh, the winding down just happened because it was getting too exhausting. I mean, as you can see from the difference in quality
Mm-hmm.
between the earlier and the
Yeah.
later issues, I was essentially taking my resources, which were static. Yeah, yeah. My I was taking static resources and then just continually making a better and better product out of it. So while it was comparatively easy to just do a smaller black and white zine and like just escalated the effort that was required to put in. and yeah, I was starting to feel tired. The fun was wearing thin at that point, and yeah, so that was essentially the wind down. I just put that last one out and took a deep sigh and thought to myself, okay, well, is there going to be a next issue? I'm not sure. And then
Yeah.
time went by, and I eventually realized, okay, I guess it's been a couple of years since I put one out now. Maybe I should do what everybody else is doing and start a damn weblog. And so I did.
Well, I think, there's that burden of expectations, where you start out doing something because you're passionate about it and you have so many ideas and you're trying to express those ideas, and maybe people read it and maybe they don't, but then
Mhm,
as it starts to catch on and you find, oh, well, people are reading this, so now I better deliver on people's expectations. That
mhm,
I think that becomes an additional level, beyond just the practical matter of producing and printing and all of that.
mhm,
So I'm sure that there's some aspect where you think, like, I
mhm.
can't keep up the level of what I want to put out based on people's expectations also.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, you reminded me of one of the fun moments. So so there used to be a television show called Portlandia that was actually filmed in Portland,
Yeah.
and and in some of the episodes, I believe they had like kind of high profile actors or so on, and I never saw this full episode, but somebody or actually a bunch of people started sending me clips. There's one moment where Steve Buscemi walks into a bookstore, and apparently the camera does this kind of like pan across the books, and like it's very obvious at one point that like I think it's something like he pauses, and then there's this moment where it kind of frames what's next to him, and what's next to him is American Gun Culture Report.
No way. Oh my
So
God.
yeah, yeah. It was yeah. In other words, that's the bookstore that sadly no longer exists, I believe. But yeah, that's where that one was from. So
So,
I did have
but
have a brief
in
moment
the
there.
show Portlandia, that was filmed in an actual bookstore, but the people, like, it was like a feminist bookstore or something like
Mhm.
that, as I recall, right? Was that
Oh
was
yeah,
a,
yeah, yeah. That
so
was
that
their tagline. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and the and that was one where I walked in and I talked to the owners and got to know them. And they actually were super pro gun. I recall that they were talking about uh taking their employees out to the place to shoot, this indoor range up by the airport. They yeah, had a relationship with the folks up there actually. So yeah, they were actually very excited to carry my magazine. I didn't have to do any kind of a hard sell with them at all. They were really cool.
Interesting. That's in other words, women's books and resources, probably, in
Yeah,
Portland.
yeah. I believe they no longer exist.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'm definitely, going to look up that episode of Portlandia because it was
mhm.
such a funny show, and I always remember the episode where they're shopping for, they're buying chicken in the grocery store, and they're like, well, trying to figure out what its name was, what its life was like, and it
Oh
was,
yeah.
it was very,
Oh
I
yeah.
thought, very typical, stereotypically, I guess, Portland.
Yeah, I mean, if I picked up my phone and turned it out the window, you would probably see one of my hens. So
Yeah.
I at least that part of the stereotype. Oh, I guess I'm drinking an IPA, aren't I now right now? So it's yeah, I guess you got me right there. I'm
You're all
locked in.
in. Thanks for tuning in to this first part of my conversation with Ross Eliot. Next week, the second part, we're going to talk about gun ownership for communal self-defense. We'll talk about gun laws in Oregon and how Democrats get it wrong. We'll talk about fighting fascists, including those who are armed and those who have badges, and much more. So stay tuned for that.